Somewhat softened by the assortment of really good Game Boy Advance games we've been looking at recently, I felt the need to canvass the ever-insightful POCubed community to help me pick some not-so-accomplished titles to redress the balance a bit. A quick Google search recommended 4 prospective names to me, and after a short poll it was a close-run thing, but this is the one you lot chose in the majority. If it's not bad enough to satisfy my grumpier side, then there are 3 others to fall back on next week. Pinobee Wings of Adventure takes us right back to the launch of the system, although I don't hold out a great deal of hope it's going to be anywhere close to the level of the other launch title we've covered so far, Castlevania Circle of the Moon. It follows the story of this mechanical bee named Pinobee, created by some scientist called Grandpa Bee. Some weird Pinocchio vibes right off the bat. Anyway, we are at the crux of it, playing a Game Boy game, so you know someone's gotta be kidnapped or otherwise vanish, with our protagonist setting off on a journey to rescue them. Along the way, Pinobee must discover the meaning of becoming a real boy, bee, grappling with themes of courage, identity, and purpose. A game so clearly aimed towards a younger audience succeeds in the main to create a vibrant, colourful environment throughout its levels, and the different worlds are at least distinct with their visuals. Not so for the level layouts themselves, which quickly become super repetitive, yet somehow still confusing in places. Objectives are vague and mostly optional, often not even told to you until after the stage has been completed. For instance, on the very first stage, you'll need to explore a bit to turn on this seed machine which is hidden up top somewhere. It doesn't tell you anywhere that you need to do this or even why you're doing it, except that if you miss it, Pinobee will remark at the end of the level that, "Oh heck, I forgot to do this thing Grandpa told me to." Same goes for the majority of the level objectives, but ultimately it doesn't seem to make much difference anyway. There's a golden enemy somewhere on each level, but the only difference it makes whether you kill the thing or not is that it says you did or you didn't at the end. Even the pickups are irrelevant. You'll see these flowers all over the place. You can collect up to 100 of these. It stops counting them after that, and they don't really do anything. They'll give you a little energy back if you're injured, but if you're not, then they don't do squat. There are no lives in this game. Die once and you'll get the choice to continue from the level beginning. Before too long, you'll just be looking for that exit and shrug nonchalantly at the results. The boss fights are the only place where the gameplay changes up at all. These are fairly effective, and although the fights are quite one-dimensional, they do at least break up the monotony. Now, it's not only flowers you can collect. Popping open these bonus blob things can sometimes grant you collectible cards. They come in 3 colors and have 16 of each. Should you collect complete bingo rows or columns of them, look at your start menu to see what I mean, you can get various bonuses like increases to your life meter, defense, or even weaken enemies. This adds a little bit of incentive to explore, but not a great deal. The character sprites are as vibrant as the backgrounds, which appeals. Games on Nintendo consoles are often strong when they go for this cartoonish aesthetic rather than a realistic one, and the animation is fluid. Although I have to remark on that bloody awful, engorged face that shows up all the time. It happens when you run out of dashes. I'll explain that in a moment. What does this accomplish except getting in the way of your platforming? It's not charming, it's not particularly funny. It just looks stupid and happens so often simply by virtue of moving around. Initially, when I started the game, I was unsettled by the weird jumping, dash mechanics, and even now I'm not entirely convinced that I understand how they work. You jump with A as normal, but can then dash a certain number of times. It tells you in huge numbers on the screen how many dashes you have, in different directions by pressing A again. It was clearly intended to be this free-flowing, speedy movement mechanic, but it really doesn't feel like that, mainly because of how finicky it can be to get Pinobee to dash in the intended direction. The number of dashes only resets when you touch ground again, which makes it odd that the character choice was that of a mainly flying insect. Pinoflee might have been more suitable, I don't know. Momentum doesn't quite flow how you expect it to either. When the predetermined length of your dash has been reached, your character's movement immediately slows up rather than letting gravity do its thing, and I don't know why. You'll start with just 1 dash, but finding this fairy will grant you extra. The audiophile in me is thoroughly disappointed at the soundtrack here. A perfect opportunity to create a bouncy, lively set of background songs was so far missed. Instead, what we get is a repetitive and frankly boring collection of not very many different loops of drivel. The level themes aren't adventurous, the boss themes aren't foreboding, none of it's really anything. I can imagine a fair few players were immediately filtered out by the irritating control hump, but should you persist with it, they're not the worst of all time. Could have been tightened up no end, sure. The jumping thing never quite feels natural or comfortable, but I've certainly seen worse. The inconsistent graphics and terrible music are even excusable after a fashion. No, the real letdown for Pinobee's debut outing is that outside of the boss fights, the game is utterly tedious with uninspired, repetitive level design and no real sense of progression or goals being achieved. Some puzzle solving, branching paths, or something would have gone such a long way. The story is derivative nonsense that does nothing to further the experience, and there's no character development at all. You get to the end of the game and you still don't care one iota about this silly Robot Bee's issues. I do have to say, though, while Pinobee Wings of Adventure is bad, it's not quite what I'm looking for. I'm sure this library can do worse. I've already played next week's shocker of a title, so in fact can confirm.